Okay, so this is where we're going to start applying the car paint shader. The shader that comes with the asset, if you actually downloaded this one, but usually a lot of them come with the Foundry shader. You're gonna have to swap those out for the Arnold shader. So this is how it looks like with the Foundry applied. It looks okay, it looks kind of plasticky. We're going to try to make this look like an actual car. So you can go to the Autodesk the Autodesk website and go into the Arnold help section. They'll really dive into how car paint works. You have the base color. You have the primer that's below this, but that's completely irrelevant when it comes to the science of the light. So you have the base color, then in between the base color and the clear coat, which is completely transparent on the car, you have this, I guess it's more like a suspension, so it has these flakes inside of the paint. Let me show you what that looks like. So some cars look like this. I mean, I think this is a toy car, but it really helps to sell the flakes that are mixed into the paint to help you get that really cool shine. So to make this really obvious, this guy basically paints cars, and you can see that he's about to pour in the suspension material. So this is the I guess the suspension liquid that's gonna be painted onto the car. And then he adds these flakes. Well, these are microscopic, but it gives a really cool effect. You can see that right there. So this gray section of the car is the base, which is going to be completely covered by this, so it's not going to be super exact to what we're doing, but just to understand the concept, you spray a base layer on, then you put this shiny part on it. And then the last step that he will do is, you'll see here, he'll spray a clear coat onto it. So that clear coat protects the actual flakes and the pigment that he painted onto the car. So we have to find a way to replicate this, because there's a lot of render time that's added when you use this particular attribute of the car paint shader, of Arnold car paint. So we're just going to simulate that, and it's going to be more than perfect for us, since we're not going to be doing any super close-up shots like this. And you can see here you have this base, and this speck kind of just rolls off. It looks really nice, and pretty much every car nowadays does that, you see. So when it comes to car paint, it's an extremely technical science on how these colors kind of blend into each other depending on the strength of the light and what angle it hits on. So you just say, oh, this is a yellow car, but you get this dark yellow here, a lighter yellow here, a metallic looking yellow here, depending on how the quality of the light affects the surface of the car. So back to our car, I mean, it looks okay, but it's not really giving us that car paint like quality. So that's what we're going to be starting to do. Something that might really help is to adjust your render settings. So if you go into the render settings here, which is this button, which is left of the hypershade button, usually these will be set to like maybe 3, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, there we go. And that's good if you have an incredibly beefy processor or GPU. But since I'm using a laptop, we're just going to take those to 1, and we're not really using volumes or subsurface scattering. So that can go to 0, and this can go to either 0 or 1, which is, anyone is fine. Okay, so this is going to be very easy. What you're going to do is select the any parts of the car that has the car paint on it, and then graph materials. So we have here the materials here. Now this is the shading group. All of the objects here on the car are connected to this shading group. So the easiest way to swap all of these objects all at once is to do something like this. I mean, technically there's many ways you can do this, but I think two very efficient ways is to create, I can just do this right here. So we can do the aicarpaint, and what we can do is just swap, bada bing bada boom, and delete, to break that connection. And if you render this, take a snapshot. So what I did is literally just swap it from the aicarpaint shading group to the shading group that came with the car, and instantly it swapped all of the items. You can actually delete that shading group, and I can show you here the difference. So this is actually what it looks like with the car paint shader on. This is the Fong shader. So you can see it's a much richer tone to the car. It's a lot less plasticky looking, and we're going to actually dial a lot of these values in even more so it looks a lot better. So let's take a snapshot and we'll continue working on that one. Okay, so I'm going to do my best, or my laptop is going to do its best to kind of show you what all of this looks like in real time. So let me see if I can squish this up so you can see everything all at once. Okay. Alright, so to kind of get the look we're going for, which is kind of that nice Hot Wheels deep rich red, what we're going to do is lower the weight of the base color. Oh, here we go. And kind of darken the red just a bit, so you'll see that coming through here, right? This is the magic point. Now we're going to change the color of the speck to red, right? So the speck is bright red. You can kind of see that happening on this side already. I'll take a snapshot so you can see how the red is starting to peek through in a way. Let's continue that. And let's increase the roughness. And then what we're going to do then is increase the IOR of the spec. So let's see what happens here. Alright, here's what I'm going to do to make it easier to see. I'm going to switch the HDR setup so you can actually kind of see how it's falling off. Some of these highlights here are falling off. So to switch the HDR setup, and it's also a good idea to look dev your asset in multiple HDR setups. So let's see, let's use a bit of a studio setting, something like that. And let's re-render. Okay, this is much better. This shows you with way more intensity what's happening. So let me reset some of these settings. Okay, so this was the base color, something very similar to this, right? And then watch what happens as we increase roughness. So watch what's happening in these areas as the roughness of the speck itself starts to spread out. So it starts to get a bit wider. So that's going to be like 0.5. 0.4. So we can kind of keep that. So this now is simulating the flex, or it's like glitter in a way. And then that IOR we can really start to crank, because that really shows us, and it looks really, really intense in the studio setting, but when you actually, say, use another light setup, it will start to look a bit more normal. It looks horrendous right now, but just trust me, it looks a lot better when you put it in a different scenario. So I've given it a different angle here. You can kind of see how that kind of looks like the flakes that you were seeing in oh, that's unfortunate. Anyway, so this kind of looks like the flakes that you were seeing in the other images of the cars. It looks like that, but it's much, much more efficient for us to simulate it in that way. Okay, so I'm not going to lie. This is the part where I don't fully understand. But when you actually take a look at, what am I trying to say? Okay, so when you take a look at, so whenever you look at car paint, you always see like these wavy, like no car panel is perfectly straight, and I think that's one of the things that gives CG away, is when car panels are so perfect that you don't really see. I'm trying to find one that's really obvious. But every car paint will have, there it is. Let's see if I can bigify. Hopefully. Awesome. So you see how there's two things happening here. One is, even though the surface from this, the surface from one point of the car panel to the next is technically straight, when paint layers on top of each other, they kind of form this orange peel type effect. So when you're very, very far away, you don't see it, but when you're very, very close up, you actually see these extremely tiny waves that are in here. Now again, we're not doing any close-up shots of this car, so we're not going to be focused on this, but say for instance you did have a close-up shot, you would be, big word coming, behooved to put in stuff like this, because it adds a lot of realism to it. I'm gonna see if I can find the other one that I was talking about, where you have these wavy marks in the panel even though it's straight. That's something that would really help the realism. It's kind of hard to see. Let's see if this one. I'm trying to make it as obvious as possible. But it's not something that you really care to notice unless you're looking for it. So let's see what this one does. Okay, so perfect. So here is, let's see if I can zoom in. This is, I love technology. So even though we know that this bonnet or hood curves right here, it's a straight curve, and here it kind of goes oval and then down a bit, and then it kind of has a straight part and it flows into this one. You can see here that this window, it's very wobbly inside of it, and that's because even though again these car panels are straight, they were formed and machined on these rolling machines, so it's not perfect, and introducing a lot of these imperfections. Like here, this line here is supposed to go straight, but there's this tiny little wobble right here, and we're going to try and introduce all of those. So the first thing we're going to do is add a 2D bump to the coat. So the coat is representative of the clear coat that's on the car. So this is where we want the effects to happen. And since the clear coat again is never going to be perfect, we just want like a very tiny amount of roughness here. And we're going to click this checkerboard, click on this Maya tab, or this Maya drop down here, and then type in bump, select bump 2D. You can see we have now this bump value, this bump node. So we're going to type in noise, should get AI noise here. Now the bump 2D, this bump value, this attribute here, is actually a vector attribute, so we're only going to use one of these alt color things here. Alright, so you can see here that when you plug the AI noise into the bump value, it's going to produce a very interesting effect for us on the code. So we're going to switch to the Arnold render view and fire away. Let's see what this does. Okay, so you can see instantly it gets rid of that clear coat because we're going to have to fine-tune the bump values. You can see here, it was here because there was no sort of surface attribute to this, and as soon as I applied it, it is gone. So we're going to have to fine-tune this. Also, just be reminded that when you start changing a lot of the values in some of these nodes, the renderer will just sometimes it just won't update, and so what you can do is go to render and update full scene, and it will completely refresh everything. So I connected and disconnected the bump node here, and for some reason it's just not picking up that value. So if you find that weird stuff is happening, just do an update full scene. And there you go. When you update full scene, which is in render, update full scene, or you can click Control U, press Control U as a shortcut, it completely resets everything, or refreshes all the inputs for your scene. Alright, so in the past I have had issues because the bump value is related to the scale and the size of the asset, which the scale of your asset is going to be relative to the scale of your scene. So I've followed different tutorials, and sometimes following a tutorial doesn't usually give you exactly the same results when it comes to bump values, because everything is so different. So what I've done here is I've literally just intersected a plane here. I just created a plane and literally just put it right there with the car. So what I plan to do is give this plane the same car shader, and then adjust that car shader inside here, just inside here, and hopefully that will be a bit more obvious as to what I'm actually doing. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I have solved world hunger. Oh my gosh, my laptop is crying for help. But anyway, what's gonna happen, what I did was, let's bigify this. Perfect. Okay, so I put the car paint on a sphere just to make it a bit more obvious. But as you can see, and keep in mind this is a little bit intense, I wouldn't have it on this particular setting, but you can see that from far away it does give that appearance of a bit of a tight speck, so you can still see the little bump values in there, so that would prove that this is still a bit strong. And of course when you get up there you can see that kind of orange peel detail. So if you were doing a close-up of a vehicle, this is definitely a setting that you would want, and I'm going to show you this here for this particular asset at this particular scene size. So if you had an asset that is a different size, it might not work as well, and you're just gonna have to tweak the values. So the bump right now is at 0.005, and it could probably go a little bit low actually, but I left it there to emphasize. And so the octaves for the AI noise is 2, and the scales are at 222. So this is good, but if we change the bump values, you'll see a dramatic difference. So let me just do that. Alright, so the bump value is now at 0.002 in just this area. You can see over here, this is the 0.005 and this is the 0.002. You can see that you can barely see this particular effect. And if that vehicle was far away, you probably wouldn't even notice how this is behaving at this point. So this is pretty good. I mean, to be honest, I'm going to keep it, and then we're going to move on to the other section. Alright, so you're actually seeing that we're getting this tiny bit of breakup here. Just a tiny breakup. Again, it's only really going to be apparent at the close-up shots. But at the farther shots, let's assume that this is a far shot, it will look like a tight ping. Just like in real life, you're not really going to notice the blemishes or the swirl marks or anything like that until you actually get up to the vehicle. So now we have it and we can continue to adjust it. Alright, so I don't quite understand why it happened, but when I went from, actually I do, I think I do. When I went from applying the materials to a sphere, and then I applied the material now to the car, as you can see, nothing happened. There's absolutely no texture here I'm able to see that's able to show me any difference. So I tweaked some more values. I started to understand how the AI noise works a little bit more, and I got something that looked very close to what you start to see on vehicles. Again, if you're using this for some close-ups, it's going to be something that really adds a touch of realism. So here we go, the settings right here for the AI noise. 10 octave scale 2020, and the color 1, I think this should be 0.5, right? And then the color 2 is, I think, 0.54. So what these do is the AI noise is a fractal pattern, and color 1 is the darker aspect, which is what pushes the bump down, and the color 2 is the white aspect of the pattern, which pushes it up. So what I'm doing, because the bump was not going low enough, so 0.001 is the lowest that most of these values in Maya go to. 0.001 is the lowest that it can go to. Couldn't go any lower, so what I had to do was then start to manipulate the AI noise values here, and that helped a lot. So that wraps up this lesson. This was just how to do the minute details on this bump. I hope you learned something. We're going to move on to the next one.